Quite recently, I've found mobile gaming to be a never-ending cycle of disappointment, misleading ads, and predatory sales tactics, just trying to squeeze whatever they can out of unsuspecting parents' wallets. But it wasn't always this way. Back in 2010, the App Store was a wave of creativity. I would check the App Store looking for anything brand new to get into, only to find myself once again holding a broken iPhone after one too many relaxing attempts at Flappy Bird. Checking the App Store each day gave my 8-year-old brain a constant dopamine hit from all the limitless, unregulated content that was either trying to break the boundaries of the current market or just rot the next generation's brains from the inside out. The most notable and influential of these games at the time came from a small indie company, Epic Games. After their purchasing of Cheer Entertainment, they made their first big mobile hit, Infinity Blade. Infinity Blade was well ahead of its time, hitting numbers thought to be impossible, given how undeveloped the technology was at the time compared to what we have today. It's a testament to how far everything's come, but it's also a bleak reminder that despite this level of graphic detail and polish being more accessible, companies instead opt for the easy route and skip over many of the necessary elements needed to create an engaging product, losing any kind of respect and commitment players would have happily given to their games if they would have just taken the time to create something worthwhile. Instead, they would rather opt for a low-effort cash grab just so they can repeat this process all over again. This level of quality and polish is almost completely devoid from the majority of games still being released onto the App Store, and whatever games that may be trying to break this cannibalistic cycle are just pushed down to the bottom underneath all the garbage. In the beginning of the first game, we met with the tutorial prologue inside of the God King's throne room. Both the characters start talking like XQC to each other about the usual force of good coming to stop the big bad.
Do I go get my bottom swing or not?
A mini fight ensues against the Black Knight, giving you a brief tutorial into some basic attacks, parrying, and the blocking feature. The fight doesn't last very long as it stops after a given amount of time and then leads into the next cutscene where the God King commends you for being a cunning warrior and that they found their catalyst. That catalyst being you, the player. You're then killed off so the bloodline mechanic can begin, which happens whenever you die in the game, coming back as a descendant to avenge your fallen kin. After the bloodline restarts, you're met with another enemy as you approach the castle. This serves as a way to expand upon the previous tutorial and introduces some cool new combat mechanics. Before you fight, you're given the dodge option to assist you in evading some of the enemy's basic attacks. Throughout this life, you'll obtain various abilities that help you in your fight to conquer the castle and defeat the God King. One of the first you obtain is a ring imbued with magic to help you bring down foes that don't have any specific resistance to it, along with a unique sword skill to help you cut down enemies' HP in an instant. Both of these can be very useful in tight situations when they stun the enemy, giving you some time to recover or get some easy hits in to turn the tide of the fight. As you progress through these fights, you'll gain XP and levels pretty much like any other fantasy style game. As you level, you can use these points to spec into whatever kind of build you prefer, or just add them to whatever you feel like at the time. It's entirely up to you. I personally went for whatever would help me trade blows with the enemies, mostly because my brain hadn't yet fully formed enough to figure out anything beyond spamming, and hitting whichever blue magic button popped up on my screen first. What's ultimately going to influence your decision on what you upgrade is your personal playstyle and the enemies you'll encounter along the way. The enemies are actually referred to as Titans. As you progress through your bloodlines, you'll fight through 3 different categories of Titans. These are light, heavy, and dual. Even though they all look fairly different, they all have the same fundamental weapons and moveset within their class. Light Titans are equipped with a simple sword and shield. The heavy have a big club or mace, and dual have 2 of the same weapon, usually in the form of a dagger or sword. The one I personally liked the most but hated actually fighting was the dual class. The movement was hard to pick up on at first, but I came to appreciate how it played into the whole acrobatic assassin theme it was going for. Between fighting all these enemies, you'll be able to pick up various loot and chests around the map. The main 2 things you'll find just sitting around are gold pouches and health potions. With the gold you pick up, you can purchase better items from the store. The main items you'll be going for are the weapons, armor, and rings. These all can come with unique bonuses like different elements of magic or buffs that assist into whatever build you're going for. It's kind of baffling how many different variants that are given with no actual paywall other than buying the coins themselves to save yourself some time. Everything could still be bought and paid for by the ones you collect in-game, so you don't have to feel forced to spend money on a specific armor set you might like. Even back then there wasn't much point in spending money on it, as you could literally infinitely glitch money by repeatedly selling the same item over and over, which for some reason never got patched out. Another key element that's placed throughout the game are the paladins. They also use a sword and shield but have a far different moveset from the light titans you'll be used to. They sometimes have an affinity towards various elements or will be placed around parts of the story as a mini boss you'll fight. The most memorable of these is obviously the Black Knight that you fought at the very beginning. If you get all the way back up in the castle and get killed off by the Black Knight before reaching the God King, you'll restart with a negative bloodline. It'll show that you're starting negative 20 years into the timeline and sets you up with having the Dark Mech suit already equipped. The Dark Mech set is one of the best in the game and lets you take down the enemies with ease, so you can collect all the golden XP you need. Within the negative bloodline, you gain far more golden XP than you normally would, which can be taken back into the normal storyline to be spent on whatever you need, making this a fairly viable strategy to scale up in between normal runs to help you pick up some of the more expensive armor and weapons inside the shop if you don't fancy using the exploit. Whenever you do end up making it past the Black Knight and reaching the God King, if you defeat him in single combat, you're given the choice to either join him or continue the fight to try and kill him. If you do join him, it fades out and rolls the credits. However, if you kill him, before he dies he says there's a far greater danger that's now coming for you. After the credits roll, a small cutscene will play where you walk up to his throne and press on the iPod Touch, which brings down a hologram displaying the Earth surrounded by a shattered moon. In this game, the story isn't particularly apparent and is more akin to something like Elden Ring. You kind of just walk around trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. During the playthrough, you'll meet various bosses who also give you tidbits of info to give you some kind of general idea, but really I never found it to be the drawing factor to my playthroughs, which is why I'm just going to avoid it altogether. I specifically wanted to focus on the first game because they are all fundamentally very similar, with the story being the main differentiator, but I pretty much skipped all of it anyway. I just ended up spamming the skip button, trying to jump right back into the action of trying to unlock whatever new shiny armor set I fancied. I would however encourage you to go and take a look into the story itself if it's something you might be interested in. It is actually pretty interesting and even has 2 books released to bridge the gaps between the games, which you might enjoy. In terms of my thoughts on the series, I actually did enjoy and play through all of them, but the style never really felt the same after the first one, and really not in any major ways. It was just things like armor designs and UI choices always felt more visually stunning and streamlined in the first game. There was a level of grit I think was removed that really sold this game to me in the first place. It's crazy to see how even though the market has expanded so far in the last 10 years, nothing has really come close to recreating the same kind of single player experience Infinity Blade achieved on mobile devices back then. It was pretty cool to see that they were not afraid to take a leap of faith with this project, and I'm glad to see that it paid off for them at the time. Long before the mobile market became almost indifferentiable from most other platforms, games like Plants vs Zombies, Doodle Jump, and Angry Birds were pretty much at the forefront in the entire App Store at the time, some of which still hold some pretty significant relevance today, Angry Birds even going as far as creating 2 movies that were unique to say the least.
Have you ever stolen anyone's children? Huh? Have you? I mean, you look like you would.
Now, I'm certainly not claiming that the Angry Birds movie was the pinnacle of animated cinema, but seeing how far it's come from being a fun little game is always inspiring. I really miss when there was none of this gacha COD Battle Royale cesspit, and games actually felt like games. I never found myself faced with battle passes or obnoxious microtransactions, only the full game I'd already paid for. Infinity Blade is probably what I would consider to be the first real mobile game. I put that in quotations because while Flappy Bird and Doodle Jump are certainly fun games in their own right, it feels almost wrong to put them in the same category. Infinity Blade was more of a standalone game, instead of something you'd load up to idle away some free time. The file size was so big you might as well have bought another device just to play it. There was so much going on. Surprisingly, before Fortnite and Gears of War appeared, Infinity Blade was said to have been one of Epic Games' most profitable games at the time. Tim Sweeney, who is still currently the CEO of Epic Games, stated that it's the most profitable game we've ever made in terms of man-years invested versus revenue. It also managed to be the fastest grossing app in iOS's history at the time, making over 1.6 million in the first 4 days. This was all obviously before Fortnite had its big boom, which might have just been an idea at the pipeline at that point. One of the reasons I think Infinity Blade managed to gain so much popularity at the time was because people who were looking for some kind of console experience might not have been able to afford all of it and just wanted something similar they could have on the go. All it cost was $6 and 1 GB of storage and you were good to go. Another aspect I miss about that time was just walking into any one of the various tech stores and there'd always be a bunch of iPhones or iPods you could go around and mess with, and they'd have a variety of games for you to just jump straight into, and I'd still just find myself killing time on Infinity Blade while my parents just wandered around aimlessly looking at junk. It's been quite a while since the latest release of Infinity Blade 3, which came out all the way back in 2013. It's very unlikely for a 4th game to ever be released, since it was from a bygone era and the market has just evolved so much ever since then. It kind of sucks to say, but that's honestly just the harsh reality of it. Gambling under the guise of being a big gacha money sink is what's currently bringing in the big bucks, so that's what's gonna get made until the well inevitably dries up, or the player bases start to realize how bad it's really gotten, which is probably never. It only ever added insult to injury when Apple removed all of Epic Games' products off their store, including both Infinity Blade and Fortnite.
Yo, what's up?
They cited that Epic refused to pay 30% on all the in-game currency purchases, and they actually sued Apple for their removal of Fortnite from the store. Apparently they haven't really commented on this situation, but have accused Apple of operating a complete monopoly over the 1 billion users of its operating system. I mean, it's kinda based, but I'm not sure how that'd help them lift their suspension, but it's up to them, I suppose. I honestly regret not reinstalling it in time before they decided to wipe it all off everything, because now even if you bought the game originally, there's no way for you to reinstall it off your previous purchases. Despite Apple's attempt to bury the franchise, you can still access them all to this day, and I'd highly recommend giving it a go if you have the time. There are various ways you can do it, and it's all entirely accessible over on the Infinity Blade subreddit and here on YouTube. It's always nice to go back and relive some of that nostalgia I had as a kid, even if it's been massacred in recent years. What I'm talking about here is that the entire franchise will be watered down to just being a weapon they added to Fortnite as a mini little Easter egg, even though the majority of the player base is still too young to even know what it is. I will give credit that it was a fun little feature to mess around with back then, but maybe they'll add some of the characters back in alongside it next time, which would be kinda cool. Anyway, I've rambled on enough and I haven't really got any more to add to this topic. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.